Well, new season, new bike, new places to ride, but no race. That's 2020 in a nutshell. I can honestly say that this isn't the season that I was expecting, or probably the one I would have signed up for, but a lot of neat things have come up as a result of the season maybe not taking your traditional trajectory. And realistically, this trip might have not happened had we not been able to go down and start our race season, so good things can happen even if they are unexpected. This year's first ride video takes us to the Rocky Mountains out of the Fallen Timber campground in the Waiporous area, kind of about an hour northeast of Calgary, down 50 kilometers of gravel road. I've ridden a couple of times in the mountains in this area, but never really camped out or done more than a single day ride, and I'm a fairly inexperienced mountain rider, but it's good as a challenge. It's very different than riding in the deep sand that we're used to. I'm actually pretty excited about this video. I got to try out some new camera and a couple of new camera angles. I've got one rear-facing one. I missed out on a lot of footage because of the angle, but it does show up later in the video, and I think it's worth sticking around for. It's kind of a neat perspective to see. This ride video is a little bit different in that it's not a race. We are just casually kind of cruising around. We're not going slow, but we're also not cruising too fast. We're trying a lot of different technical terrain that we're not used to riding in, so it was a good first foray in. We spent 3 days there riding, part of a fourth, but it really stretched us a little bit, and I learned a lot. First thing you're going to notice about the video is that there's a lot of up and downs. Tried my best to capture the steepness of what was there. It wasn't too extreme, but it definitely wasn't flat either. Like I said, we're used to riding in deep sand, whooped out areas, so this is quite the candy for us. There's also some good river crossing, single tracks show up later on. One thing that's also pretty apparent in the area is that there is a lot of shale. There are lots of buried rock as well. Very bumpy, actually. It's not that dissimilar other than the vertical component to what we ride in Washington. It should actually be pretty good as far as skills training for that. But it's interesting. You slide around a lot. You have to be extraordinarily careful on your brakes, particularly in the downhill. You do move along slowly, and I know that with experience you'll start to speed up a lot, get on top of the things, but that shale slides around a lot, and it's pretty difficult to trust yourself to be able to carry the speed down that you need to get on top of it. The real difficulty for me was being able to tell when the ground underneath me was going to be firm enough that I could load up on the front brake versus when it wasn't.
So close!
I get my hand on the clutch.
It was a good wheelie, though. Several good wheelies.
Oh, I wish I had an electric start right now.
Yeah. That's worth the 10 pounds. I don't care how many years you ride for, that right there, 10 pounds.
It's always great to get together with a group of guys when you're all kind of similar riding levels, each better at some stuff than each other. Really pushes you to try things you wouldn't normally do, eggs you on a little bit, and you get a good laugh at other people's expense too, which is always nice. It sucks when you're the only one crashing. Not too many years removed from that, so I do really appreciate being able to stay up on my pegs most of the time. We tried some terrain of the single track. We didn't do a ton of the single track. We tend to stay to the more flowy trails, rock, hill climbs, things like that. But this was a neat little trail we went on. I'm terrified of heights, which is a little ironic given my life. But it's interesting. So many of these rocks, you can't really see how much they stick out, but they align in line with the trail. And it may going through here a little unnerving at times, and the trees are really tight, but you focus so much on the trail that you don't really notice that there's actually a pretty good drop-off on both sides. Well, you're sitting there weaving, pulling your bars through the trees, round one to get around the other, leaning the bike over. It's fun. I think we decided that if we were to get into this sort of single track, that we would want to really dedicate a day or two to it as part of a longer trip. But it's very different than what we normally do. We tend to be more higher speed, not necessarily motocross style, but definitely more open style. I'll talk about it more in a little bit here, but I recently switched bikes, and this is an area where the newer bike was a little bit different, maybe a little more difficult than the old bike, although I think given a few more weeks of setting it up and getting everything dialed in, it should be probably at least as good as my previous bike, but I'll get to that a little bit later in the video. Well, next up here is my newest video to be tried. It's rear-facing camera. I tried to sync the times. I think it does pretty well. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments. My camera angles I fought with a little bit. I wasn't able to look at the footage overnight to see whether it was working out or not. And it turns out it did match well, and then my camera timing was off, so I had some front-facing footage, and then I had some rear-facing footage, but only a very limited number where it was actually both. It does make cool videos of the people riding behind you, which is fun, but not super useful in that it's actually a little bit nauseating when you look at it for too long. And then the Sony camera, the lighting is not quite as good as the newer GoPro that I have. Next up here is video proof that I don't mind showing when I don't make it. I won't show you all of them. Some of them are embarrassing, but this one's not too bad. I made it most of the way up the hill climb, just kind of lost it a little bit on the left there. Coming up here in a second, rocks go jagged and start lining with the trail, and those are surprisingly hard. Once you start kicking around, it's pretty hard to recover from that. I did have a low speed off on Monday morning, trying to bump start the bike. I was having problems with the starter, but landed right on a rock on my stomach and haven't quite felt right since, but I'm pretty sure that I'll recover. Some of you may have noticed already, but I'm no longer riding the Honda. I still do own it. My son will be transitioning to it this year. He's pretty excited to get onto a bigger bike, and I'm pretty excited to try a new bigger bike as well. I had a good friend here in Edmonton that had a very pristine, maintained, and upgraded TC450 that came with a 450 engine, so I'm riding a modified 2007 Husqvarna TC450 with a 250 frame. It's been a great bike so far. I really enjoyed it. I'm still just dialing in the last little bits, but it really did come in prime condition. It's a bit of an older bike, but it's actually turned out to be quite easy to ride and quite enjoyable to ride. Buying a bike has always been such a double-edged sword for me. I end up spending so much money getting them back up to prime condition that so often it probably would have just been cheaper to buy something newer, but we don't have bottomless pockets, so we went used it, and in this case it turned out extraordinarily well. The bike was already in better shape than I normally bring them up to, and came with a lot of additional parts, so extraordinarily thankful for that. It should be just a great overall ride. It rides way better than anything from that era should, and the power is amazing. It's almost electric-like, very smooth, extraordinarily powerful off the bottom, but not to rip your hands off 450-like, but once you dial it up, it sure hauls. It's going to be a handful riding in the desert with this thing, but it should be a lot of fun. I'm still putting together in my head exactly how I feel about the engine, but I've been reading more and more about enduro technique, and they keep talking about flywheel effect, and I think that that's what makes the bike so manageable. It does have gobs of power, but it doesn't come on super fast. It just makes the engine extraordinarily hard to flame out, and I can get through things in second gear with just a tiny dab of the clutch, or even no clutch if I don't mind getting kicked around a little bit more, and it just tractors unbelievably. Normally you'd be into first gear doing that, but you jump around so much, and second gear with a tab of clutch is just so much smoother through most of this stuff, and it's great that as a 4-stroke that it just won't have that flame out like you would normally get. That being said, the guys were making fun of me because it sounds through so much of this stuff that I'm actually below idle in it, but it goes to tell you just how hard this engine is to flame out. In the few times that I did stall out this weekend, one time was obviously my fault, as you'll see later on, but the rest of it's because I was stuck up against something and the tire just literally stopped turning, and there's nothing you can do 2-stroke or 4-stroke to prevent that. I know from watching videos of people riding in the mountains that there's a lot of controversy, particularly in Alberta, over riding access in these areas. This is a public use area that's specifically for off-road vehicles. We are crossing the river here, but it is directly on the trail. We tried our very best to make sure that we were using only the designated trails and staying on them. We didn't want to be ruining land. It is important that we maintain that, but it's also good that we have access to some of it, that we aren't locked out because of our hobby. Riding can be such a great hobby for getting out and enjoying the wilderness. I know some people won't see it that way, but I think that there's a good balance to be had here where we can both be conscious of the environment, but also be able to have access to it with these off-road vehicles. You can ride 100 hours in a year, but it's a virtual guarantee that if you stall out once on a hill somewhere, that everybody will be within 3 feet of you with their engines off so they can hear you and make fun of you. Sunday night, after we had already done a few days of riding here, we just kind of stuck around the campground, riding locally, just choosing lines. They had this nice little area for log hopping. There's some logs over on the other side that was a little bigger than I was willing to try. But this little log pile was fun, or log jump, whatever you want to call it. This hill climb was right next to the campground. We did scope it out first. It was actually a lot of fun. I didn't get a great line on it, but managed to make it up. You see Tim come up. He has a pretty clean shot through, but Devin coming up after him, it's a good reminder of how quickly things can go wrong. He does save it, but it's a good reminder, a good view of how much you can get kicked around doing these hill climbs. One little rock in the wrong spot that you didn't see, or your hands on the throttle a little off, and it can send you for a flight pretty quick. Well, thanks for joining me for the first video of the year. Hopefully we can get a few more together, maybe some with the kids. Hope you enjoyed it, and let me know what you think in the comments of the new video style, the new camera, the new angles. Hopefully we can try some new stuff with that as well in the next one.